The number one question I often get is, how do you speak such fluent Japanese? Well, here's the secret. ということで、今日は私の秘訣を共有したいと思います。Today, I want to share with you guys all the methods that I did to immerse myself in Japanese, and alongside that, give you guys tips and tricks for improving your Japanese learning in order to truly sound as fluent as possible. And if you don't know who I am, my name is Ananya. I've been self-studying Japanese since 2013, so it's been almost over 10 years, but the bulk of my studying was done within the first 5 years. I have the JLPT N1 and have my own course here called Japanese with Ananya, and if you're looking to learn beginner Japanese, definitely make sure to check that out. I also want to share with you guys a bunch of free resources that I've used in the past. I've made videos previously about this, but I really want to just dig into all the immersion tactics and a little bit more of the nitty-gritty today. To start off, the number one, without a doubt, method to studying Japanese effectively and fluently is immersion. It is the most important tool that you can possibly have, and in order to stay motivated, a lot of the material that you use to immerse is very important. So whether that be TV shows, movies, songs, etc., you really have to pick the things that you are willing to enjoy over a very long period of time to sustain your learning. And I want to share with you guys everything that I used and really give you perspective into how you can study the most effectively. So if I'm looking at this, just don't mind me, these are my notes. The number one way to study is immersion. But what does immersion look like? How does that look like in a day? So when I first started learning Japanese, I was in middle school. I had access to the internet, so that meant I had a lot of apps that I was using. I was watching a lot of YouTube, TV dramas, anime, and trying to keep myself as involved with Japanese as possible. And I fell in love with Japan around 2012, 2013, and there was a manga that I really liked called Alice in the Country of Hearts, and I wanted to read the Japanese version of that so badly, and that's kind of how I started studying Japanese. Having a really strong passion or interest in something really propels your learning in ways that you can't imagine. But anyway, here is kind of what a day in the life would look like, at least for me when I was 13 and in middle school. This is how I would study. So I usually woke up at 6 a.m. or something. I was ridiculously motivated for some reason. And before going to school, I would go on Nico Namahoso. So on Nico Namahoso, I would spend about 30 minutes to an hour on someone's live, and it's kind of like a live streaming platform in Japan that was much more popular back in the day. It's like YouTube now. But I would basically go onto a stream with only one person, and then I would just chat up the person on the other end and just pretend that I was Japanese for as long as possible, and then have a conversation with them. And that's kind of how I made friends at the time, as well as practice. So after that's done, on the way to school, I would practice my flashcards. And I've showed this app so many times, but I hope you can see it. This one, it's called Japanese, and it's the one that I used and I still use to this day. Maybe I can include some screenshots of how I use it. Now that I live in Japan, one thing that I really try and do is if I ever hear a word that I really just don't know, I make a habit of instantly looking it up and including it in my flashcards. Because in that moment, you already have a mnemonic to remember that word. You have a moment where that word is used in a context that you can remember and recall. So it's a much faster way to study the word. But if you're just starting out, I think it helps to watch like simple children's TV shows and maybe catch on to words that you don't know, and then you can just essentially study them, which I think is a lot easier. If your goal is studying for the JLPT, I would say that my advice may not be the best because I never studied to optimize for that test. In my head, I just wanted to sound like a joshikose, a JK, which is a Japanese schoolgirl. And so I had absolutely no interest in passing tests. I'll make a video in the future about Japanese pronunciation, because when I was studying, I optimized for having a strong pronunciation, not as much for having a strong vocabulary, and that was a conscious decision. So I think studying does involve a lot of decision making in terms of what your actual outcome goal is. So definitely keep that in mind. But yeah, if you're studying for the JLPT, I would just suggest, they actually in this app have an entire flashcard deck for the N1 to N5, so you're covered. But I don't think it's very easy to study. Like I don't find it very motivating when I think about the thousands of words that I have to memorize for a test. So if that's not your goal, I think there's better ways to motivate yourself to study. Anyway, continuing, I would go to school during my lunch break or something. I didn't really do anything in my lunch break, just ate. Anyway, so after school, I would have practice, and then after practice, that was when I would probably spend an hour or two watching anime or TV dramas. And anytime I encountered a word, I would either write it down or look it up. Sometimes I would just write it all down in a little booklet. So that way, once I was done watching, I could look up each and every one individually and then study them. And when I look something up and I put it in my little notebook, right? I'm not just looking it up and being like, oh, that's what that means. Cool. No, you need to look at that word, say it like a couple times, maybe even go back to the show, see how they said it. I would use Google Translate and then kind of mimic how the Google Translate voice was saying it, because you want it to get as close as possible to the real thing. And you also want to train your ears to just be really good at sensing when something is off. So nowadays I'm able to catch when my pronunciation is off, my pitch accent is off from the real deal, you know? For the most part, like, it's important to be able to catch yourself, because especially in Japan and with Japanese speakers, they're not going to point out when you make a mistake all the time. So unless it's a really like big mistake, they're not going to say anything. So it's really important to catch yourself and be your best kind of study buddy to make sure that that doesn't happen. Because the number of times I've heard someone say kawaii instead of kawaii, no. And oftentimes I would write a journal entry on Lang 8, which does not exist anymore. And you know, my journal entry would be corrected by native speakers. And Hello Talk has this feature, so you could just use that for it. In the beginning, I used Take Kim's Guide to Learning Japanese. These are all free, by the way. And study grammar, which for me was the hardest part. The grammar always tripped me up. And then if you're having any trouble understanding how to go about studying Japanese, tofugu.com has great resources. They're also free as well. And then Wanikani is something I used, and I just recently checked. I only used it up until level 3. I didn't have any money at the time, so I couldn't afford to use the actual service, but it made for a great practice because it helped me remember the most basic kanji, you know, like shu, which kind of looks like a box with like a stick going right through it, or like a mouth. So there's like ways to remember. Another resource I would recommend is Maggie Sensei. Definitely not as popular anymore, but it has a lot of good grammatical systems, and like they teach you using mnemonics, and it's kind of like what I read, I would just like write out as much as I could to try and remember. But yeah, those are all the resources I would recommend. So I think I would study like 3 to 4 hours per day, maybe. Most of my studying would be done on the weekends. Like, studying really adds up, and whether you're in middle school or whether you're doing a full-time job, like, it's tough to balance everything. But just know that the little 10 minutes does pay off, but it needs to be substantial. Like, it needs to be like a proper study session as well. Like, you need to be studying at least an hour, either every day or just on the weekends, in order to truly like see that growth. And once you've reached the point where you can make basic sentences, you're ready to talk to people and use Hello Talk, I don't know, make friends in your local area, because that's how you're really gonna get that like natural level. The next thing that I want to talk about is pronunciation. How to really get it to be at this level that it sounds just like a Japanese speaker. And I'll make a more in-depth video about this, but I think there's like a bit of a misunderstanding. I'm not sure if this is talked about a lot in the language learning community, but I felt like if I was gonna learn Japanese, like the sounds that I'm hearing, like a, e, I, o, u, or sashisu, seso, or rariru, reru, these sounds, we hear them through the English alphabet, we read them through the English alphabet, through romaji, but it's not the same thing. So it really requires you to kind of re-engineer how you move your mouth for every single sound, even though it sounds similar. And so that starts from a, I, u, e, o. Like u, like at first you'd want to just say it how you'd say a U sound in English, but it almost requires you to kind of like go like ooh, and the way that your breath kind of goes through when you're saying it, like ooh, actually yeah, my breath doesn't even go through when I say it. So I think there's like certain really minute things that you have to change in your pronunciation in order to achieve that natural sound, and it requires you to take the same breath kind of as a native speaker. And there are videos about this online, so I highly recommend checking that out if that's part of your goal, because I personally, and I feel like I've talked about all these things in my videos, but I truly believe that you know, your Japanese can be as incredible as possible. You can have incredible vocabulary, but what I find to be very beautiful is when a Japanese pronunciation is like smack dab, like on point, and almost hard to decipher whether an English speaker or Japanese speaker. Like, when you sound that natural, you invite people's hearts to kind of open up and open conversation, and I personally wanted to get to that level. And so yeah, I think pronunciation wise, the hardest ones are rariru, reru, so it took me a while to get to that point. And even to this day, there are times where I practice rariru, reru from time to time, because sometimes you can just fall off. Like, you'll build a pattern and get used to it, and then, you know, you sound kind of off at some point. I think I noticed that with me with like the T sound, tachi, tsu, te, to. Sometimes I would make the T sound with my American T sound and not even understand it, like to. Like, nanka, yeah, like that would happen sometimes. So you have to watch out for that. It's tricky. Being very mindful of it and building healthy habits earlier on will save you much more time in the long run. Another popular option that I've often heard from other learners is dating a Japanese person. I think it's probably a super quick way to study a language language and get really good at it. I didn't do that. Like I said, like most of my learning was done in the first 5 years. I wasn't dating anyone myself, but I've seen a lot of people grow a lot, but it's not gonna be automatic. I don't think any form of language for me has been automatic. It's been a lot of just being aware of what I'm doing, like just the awareness of what you're saying, how you're learning, the input output. It changes everything. And I think when I first came to Japan, the first maybe 6 months or so, I would learn new words, but I don't think I was necessarily improving because anything that I heard, if I didn't know what it was, I would just block it out and I wouldn't try to understand it, learn it, research those words. So I'm still, doing that sometimes, and I think it's a result of when, you're constantly surrounded by the language. But yeah, if you can, just be very aware of Japanese when you see it around. Or even when I was back home in like the San Francisco area, like I would try and read any Japanese that my eyes could spot. Like Japanese restaurant, what does it say? It says kimi no or something like that. I don't know. I would try and read it and just like force my brain to do these like little side quests throughout the day, and it'd be a good studying practice. And someone was sitting next to me, they're Japanese, eavesdrop on their conversation. So little things that you can do to kind of bring that studying in. And another one that I've mentioned is following people on social media who are Japanese. Maybe take a screenshot of their posts and try reading the Japanese and then comparing that, like copy paste it into like Google Translate or DeepL, and then see, were you right? What is this word that you don't know? Pull it into your flashcards. I also use jisho.org, I believe, to look up any words when I'm on my web browser, and they're really good as well. And another thing I want to kind of stress with immersion is that it's truly helpful in building natural Japanese fluency. And the reason I say that is because if you look up a word in your textbook and try to start using it one day, I think it's too big of a jump because the definition only really, creates meaning for it. But a lot of the words that I often look up these days in Japanese, I look up the definition and I don't think it's like a proper example of what that word means, nor do you actually learn how to use it. So the best way to learn how to, build sentences is simply copying them. And so if you see this TV show and they're saying, itsumo arigatou gozaimasu, that's something where you can be like, oh, they're saying thank you always, like thank you so much. So it's a phrase that you can remember. But if you study it using a dictionary, you can say something like arigatou gozaimasu itsumo, which isn't wrong, but it's more natural to say itsumo before. So maybe it is wrong. But anyway, you really learn by having those real conversations, or even just shadowing from these real situations on TV. It's not real anymore. But anyway, shadow from TV shows. That's all I want to say. But I have a good example. So I made this tweet a while back when I first moved here, and it goes, 言語勉強はたくさん間違っていい。私は日本語を5年間勉強してきたところで、つもりと予定の使い分けができなくて、よく何時に終わるつもりですかと聞いていた。上達すればするほど指定されなくなるので、少しずつ言葉のニュアンスに気づいた。結局、たくさん間違えることで人は言語勉強で成長する。So, I often mixed up these two words, つもり and 予定, which when you look in the dictionary, let's look that up together actually. When you look this word in the dictionary, it says plan or intention. And 予定 also says plan, but it says arrangement, schedule. But if you look at those two words just point blank, they're very similar. And so I didn't really know how to use them. But after hearing native speakers say it so often, I realized, like つもり is kind of a word that I see in TV dramas when there's a very disgruntled character and they're like, 何してるつもりですか? And it's like, what do you dare to do? Like, what are you doing? Like, the nuance is very like, it's a bit aggressive. It's a bit, scary in some ways. But if you hear that, it's like, oh, they're angry. But if you hear 何時に終わる予定ですか? Like, oh, what time will you be finished? When do you plan to be done? つもり is like, when are you going to be done? You know what I mean? Little things like that where you can catch them if you watch a lot of TV like me. I'm sorry for prescribing a TV addiction to you guys, but I think it's very meaningful. I really hope that these tips helped. All of like learning Japanese just really requires a lot of consistency and just a lot of being delusional as well. I would also convince myself that I would be a great Japanese speaker and I would be really fluent one day. So having that delusion and really just affirming it to yourself is very important as well. Our brain feeds off of that kind of stuff. So I would recommend doing it. But yeah, I should have all the resources that I mentioned in the video linked below. I'm so sorry there's not more. Like, I'm just sharing what I kind of used at the time, and I used a lot of like used books as well. So unfortunately, I don't know exactly what I was using. And if you're looking to travel to Japan or just get started with the basics of Japanese, check out my beginner Japanese course. And with that, let me know in the comments what other questions you want me to answer, and make sure to subscribe subscribe and like if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. じゃあねー。